and gentlemen. I'm Manish. I'm representing Ciena on my thought around cloud. And what's the relevance of cloud to the telcos. I'll directly jump into terms of industry trends, what I see as cloud adoption or the SME registration and the 5G use cases, which is actually driving the market. If I have to just bring up something on the chart, you would see the cloud adoption, and the inference which I'm trying to draw from this graph is that the hyperscalers are growing big way, and that's a positive trajectory which they are following, which is showing a very, very motivating result. If I have to move on and I try to relate it with the India startup registration, we see something from over the last 5 years that there have been a lot of registrations, what we see, and we are growing at a pace of 12 to 15% year on year, which is putting India ahead. We are actually the third largest startup ecosystem if we see, which is great. And then we have our infamous three-prong 5G use cases, which are actually influencing the complete ecosystem in terms of what future strategies operators might like to take, and probably they'll have to take a different path to reach the same goal. If I just build upon in terms of, we have heard a lot of around 5G as the use cases from bandwidth. There's a lot of use cases which are getting developed from the latency perspective. But one more aspect which I typically see is in terms of the number of devices which get connected, which is kind of humongous if we have to talk about. And if we still follow, or the telcos still follow the same structure as what they have been doing traditionally, I think so I see a graph which will be a scissor effect between a cost and a revenue chart, which we definitely want to see in an inverse way. We don't want to see it the way it is actually being depicted, which puts up a huge pressure on telcos in terms of their capex, opex, and to increase the revenues in terms of their time to market. In my personal opinion, I see business agility, customer experience, and cost reduction will be actually the major drivers behind which telcos should be devising their networks. What I mean by business agility is the time to respond to the market demands, because we don't have time actually to respond back into the market. We have to come back with the best of the opportunities in terms of launching the new services with the best operational cost. We have to definitely bring upon that wow experience for the customers, because that's something which is going to stay back with us as a customer, as hiring up the new customers, and that will make us differentiated into the market. And the third is the innovation and the cost reduction. So definitely we need a reinvention of the back-end processes and the way we actually looked upon the things in terms of launching the services. This will definitely look upon and bring upon the revenues, and that inverse of the graph which I saw, which I showed in between, in terms of cost versus revenue, is definitely going to be inversed. If I would have to conclude it in one statement, it is that the telecom service providers or the communication service providers precisely have to take a literal shift, and they have to become a digital service provider, in which cloud native is definitely the way to go. If I can quickly put upon in terms of what telco cloud portfolio I see personally, I think that there are three major building blocks in that portfolio. The first and foremost being the telco cloud infrastructure, which will move around the app modernization, the multi-cloud enablement modules, intrinsic security, which actually starts right from the physical layer and kind of going above, and then the digital workspace and the virtual cloud network. And this has to go all the way up across all the domains in terms of core, edge, RAN, and private 5G. This actually enables us for an open, disaggregated, and a vendor-agnostic ecosystem, and that is something which is definitely required for us to grow. If I have to top it up in terms of telco cloud automation, this is something which will move in terms of on top of cloud infrastructure, making it more robust and more efficient by using the multi-cloud domain orchestration or authentication service or the infrastructure management. And then comes the telco cloud operation, the wow feeling, which is actually towards the customer in terms of showing them end-to-end performance of the KPI mapping and the customer experience. This has been what we have been doing virtually. We have been kind of pretty much building up the silo network, whether it is the OSS, BSS, or IT-based system, or it is the EPC, IMS, or WAS systems, or probably the MEC or the HVNFs. We have all seen these developing and getting grown in terms of the isolation, and that is how the networks actually increase up their cost in terms of the deployment cost what we have. The challenges what we typically see is with this strategy was infrastructure life management, because we are always actually over provisioning the infrastructure. we are actually not in time in terms of application onboarding because there is a lot of integration which is required in these silo networks. And then comes the real time wherein the customer experience requires everything and anything to be done very, very fast, which in this side of model is absolutely not possible. In my personal opinion, I think so, this will be a 4-stage journey for the telcos to move towards cloud. The first and foremost, which we have all passed, I think, which is the legacy network wherein we had all purpose-built hardware, all the SLA and KPIs used to be stitched back to the hardware performances. And these networks are precisely very, very complex, expensive, and very, very hard to run. There was no predictability which was around these networks. And by the way, all the hardware was over-provisioned. If I go the second stage, which is the virtualization, most of telcos have actually moved into this space where they have virtualized most of their hardware. These are hypervisor-driven architectures. But what we still lag is the operation and the business continuity processes are still manual and minimally automated. The next stage, what we see will be a cloud-ready stage, which probably will be an introduction to various automation techniques. And it will be an adoption of a partial cloud native, which will actually be an API-centric network. SLA KPIs will no more be tied to the hardware. And definitely, we will have infrastructure as more agile in terms of their flexibility and the way we provision the network. And then the last stage comes up with cloud native, which is going to be highly dynamic, flexible, agile, a stateless network, which actually offers you self-discovery, self-healing networks. We have something which is an auto-scaling network, wherein the hardware or the infrastructure is not over-provisioned, and it is efficiently being utilized. And then we have the visibility and the intelligence which is achieved through tailored telemetry, which is actually the demand of the time for now. If I can just fall back that cloud, as my fellow panelist also mentioned, I think so this is not a one-stop shop where cloud can be the one solution for all. Probably we have to look for all the other aspects also as edge computing and probably what strong points we have with the operators. Operators are already geared up with all the flexible networks what they can put up. They already have a self-service portal in terms of pay to grow. They already have something which is secured at the physical layer, something which they are doing with the data center interconnect in terms of leveraging their shared IP network. But this is actually a talk of the town in terms of probably there is a requirement of a change of architecture within the data centers where they may like to move from a shared IP structure to a dedicated layer 1 or a layer 2 structure for the simple reason, if I can just, okay, so if I can just show on the large data transfer which is required, I think so that's the catch where probably we'll have to look for some data center change. And then we have an end-to-end automation which actually revolves around the programmable infrastructure, the intelligence and the analytics what we have, and the software control and automation, which actually is a closed loop environment wherein it improvises and it actually does what is required to be done at the foremost and at the front end. Moving on, I heard my co-panelists again, I think so the ideas are very, very overlapping in terms of there is definitely a partnership required between the hyperscalers. Hyperscalers are very, very dominant in that market of core center and the data center market and in terms of their cloud strategy. What we see is they also realize that the services, the way they are coming up, they have to come towards the on-prem kind of a scenario, they have to come towards the edge, wherein we find the CSPs are very, very strong. So what we see is there is a partnership in formation wherein cloud has to come down and probably the CSPs have to go up the ladder. And that will be the journey for the CSPs to actually be the digital service provider, while ICPs will have more control, or more virtual control over the network piece end to end. So that is probably what is going to be the future. I just want to end up, this is my last slide in terms of, is cloud native essential? In my humble opinion, it is indeed. And for the simple reason, the capability which it brings in terms of delivering quickly, modernizing or customizing the present day applications, and the speed which it brings to kind of time to market is something which makes it separate. And if I have to say, I just want to relate it to a birth of a caterpillar. Cloud native is difficult, but if we don't do it, it is going to be worse. So applications of future actually are to be built in cloud, are for the cloud, maximizing the benefits of the cloud. And I would just end up my session. We need to reinvent our profession to do better. Thank you. Happy to connect.